Hello, fellow procrastinators of the world. It's me. I'm back. After almost a year, actually. It's been quite a while. That is a sword I made. And this is the story of how I made Cheng's Scimitar in 10 days. I'm going to put a timer somewhere on the screen to keep track. Day 1 starts with me drawing this template during lunch break at work. Since the version of Cheng I wanted to cosplay more closely resembles something Star Ember would have drawn, I decided to go with the manhwa design of the scimitar instead of the dongwa design. Except for the grip, because what on earth even is that? I don't understand. For the handle, I just copied something off of AliExpress so I don't have to think, and it worked out. Don't worry, sweet summer child. You'll have your turn one day. I graduated a while back and I'm no longer in university, and since I don't have quick access to my favorite print shop with a large format printer anymore, I stopped by at the computer shop on my way home to have my template printed as God intended.
Tapos, black and white po, paprint po as is sa A4, kada isa.
Oh. In parts, on several pieces of A4 paper. I never expected to see a 4:3 aspect ratio monitor in the year of our Lord 2025, but here we are, and A4 has never looked so long and skinny, kind of like Cheng actually. Okay, so Cheng's Scimitar is really curvy and skinny, right? The primary reason why I was initially hesitant to pick up this project was because I had such a hard time cutting, flattening, and bending into shape the PVC pipe I used as a base for Raiden Sword. So I was desperate to find literally anything else that I could use. Something more pliable, more yielding, and my search led me to a bookstore I entered on a whim right before they closed. And well. I think I got my answer. Anyway, when I got home, I cut my template up, glued the pieces together, and took this picture to make sure that I got my proportions right. Using this image of Cheng, I found out that the length from the top of the pommel to the bottom of the crossguard is roughly the same distance as Cheng's collar to stomach. So I just emulated that. For context, I am 5'7", and the length of my template ended up being somewhere around 110 centimeters. For the record, I had the boots I was going to use for the cosplay on in the picture to make sure that everything looks good for my height. Also, fashion. And that concludes day 1. For day 2, I got off work and began working on my base. At this point, I still wasn't sure if the hula hoop thing was going to work out or not, so I tried to see if I could even use a hula hoop correctly to make sure I didn't waste like 50 pesos. And unfortunately, the thing refused to assemble itself, which meant I had no choice but to succeed in this project. I got one of the hula hoop pieces, hit it with a heat gun until it was sufficiently malleable, and shaped it to the handle. Because this was cheap plastic, this process was actually quite easy. Now, Warbla is not available for sale in the Philippines, and I think this instance was the closest I could ever get to using any form of thermoplastic, really. By the way, if you're ever planning on using a similar material, make sure you're heating it up in a well-ventilated area or that you're wearing a respirator, because the fumes I inhaled definitely cost me a couple of hours of my lifespan. Not all of us could live for 800 years. For the rest of the scimitar, I made the base out of foam board. I wanted the part of the scimitar under the hilt to be thicker than the rest of the blade, so I made a skeleton and covered everything with EVA foam. For the crossguard, I simply glued the stack of several pieces of 5mm EVA foam on top of each other using Forbidden Jam, aka contact cement, and sanded the sides where I thought the edges should be rounded. I started working since 8 p.m. of day 2 and I finished around 6 a.m. of day 3, only to find out that it's ugly. It's so ugly. Because of my over-eagerness combined with my exhaustion from work and sleep deprivation, I unfortunately sanded too much off of the hilt and the blade. I also thought that I made the blade far too thick and that it had an overall funny shape. I must have made a mistake in the cutting process at some point, and unfortunately, the foam board inside made it sort of difficult for me to cut off the extra bits on the sides that I wanted to get rid of. And, well, I went to bed disappointed but determined to start from scratch. After about 4 hours of sleep, I woke up, did laundry, and got this shriveled up pepper looking thing onto my table. It does kind of look like a pepper, doesn't it? That's right, it's 2 pieces of the hula hoop that I connected and flattened using a heat gun. I already knew prior to going to bed that I had run out of foam board, at least for the blade part, so I thought I could just use more of the hula hoop as an alternative for the base. And now I can honestly say that the title of this video is not a clickbait. I didn't record the flattening process in full because I was crushing out so bad on the floor. But it involved a piece of plywood, some scissors, and a lot of anger. I connected my dried chili pepper to some leftover foam board precariously, but we don't talk about that. All that's important is that they're connected now. And once again, proceeded to cover everything with foam. Instead of repeating what I did the previous night with the construction of the blade, I got some EVA foam, the thinnest one I got, scored the middle on the back side, applied super glue bit by bit to the groove I made, and pinched the right side while the glue dried. This allowed me to get a sort of bevel shape without bulking up the sides too much. I super glued this piece of EVA foam to the flattened hula hoop and did the same to the other side. I finished by gluing a layer of EVA foam to the cross guard on top of the blade area to ensure that that area is thicker compared to the rest of the sword. This time, I held back on sanding the sides of the hilt because I might sand off too much again. Here's a picture of the results of day 3 and here's a picture of my 2 attempts side by side. Now, it doesn't look that obvious from the picture, but trust me when I tell you this, my second attempt was way better looking than my first one. Day 4 found me at a protest, then a train ride, then a cup sleeve event. Hey, I drew that! Then another train ride, this time with extra people, and another protest.
Pwede humingi isa, please? Salamat po.
There was free arroz caldo. It was great. Obviously, I was dead tired after all that walking and traveling I needed to do, so no progress was had that day. No progress on day 5 either because I was still in a bit of pain. Am I growing old? A typhoon made landfall north of Metro Manila around this time and brought heavy rains to the region. So this was the sight that greeted me on the way home of day 5. Like, wow. Who wouldn't want to continue crafting after having to thread such clean, shallow, fragrant waters? Thankfully, we were allowed to work from home the next day, and the idea of not having to waste any of my already very scarce energy commuting to work gave me a boost. So sometime past 3 a.m. on day 6, I got back to work. I braved sanding parts of the hilt this time and got to doing some detail work. Since I was in a hurry because, mind you, the shoot was 4 days away. Oh my god. It was 4 days away! And I've yet to finish anything. I just eyeballed the designs on this specific image, cut the designs out of scrap foam, and super glued everything to the hilt. For the most part, I tried to keep the size and location of the eye as accurate as possible, but for everything else, I did what I thought looked okay. Not that I could copy some parts of the official design if I tried, like, what is this? What? And we're done. Good job, me. Alright, yeah, the other side exists. For the opposite side, I didn't bother following the reference photo. I just decorated that side enough to not embarrass myself. Not that I'd be showing this side in photos anyway, and like, no one would be looking at it. But I know that that side existed, and for my own peace of mind, I just tried to make it look as elaborate as possible. I wanted to depict the eye being closed here, but honestly, it just ended up looking like a Venus flytrap. I think I overslept that night because I woke up at 5 the next morning and I had to speed through slathering foam clay all over the parts that needed smoothing, as well as the open seams I accidentally made because apparently I'm so bad at gluing things. Mind you, this part alone took me an entire hour. I was almost late for work that day because of some paste. During lunch break, I ran to the bougie mall near my office to a bougie hardware store to find curtain rod end caps, and while I did find some, what do you mean they're 169 pesos for 2 pieces? Yeah. No, ain't no way. I did manage to find a cheaper pair at a less bougie hardware store that evening, and while I emptied the contents of my camera memory card into my hard drive, I saw the bottom half of one of them. I attached it to the top of my pommel and let's just say Wei Wuxian would be happy seeing this. I was a clown that night thinking, oh, I'm just going to get a bit of rest. But I ended up falling asleep, and next thing I know, it was already time to get ready for work. This was day 8, and I haven't started on the sheath yet, so I thought, yeah, I kinda need to change that ASAP. So I traced the sword onto some 5mm EVA foam, added a couple of centimeters to the side for seam allowance, glued the two sides together, and found out that the sword didn't fit inside. Good job! So I hurriedly sliced the sheath in half, traced one side, added more seam allowance, glued the two pieces together, but this time apparently I made it too loose. On any other sword, this would probably be an okay look, but watching Scimitar is supposed to be a skinny legend, so yeah, this simply wouldn't do. But Hana, weren't you running late for work? There's no way you'd bring e-ming to your office, right? Obviously, I wasn't allowed to record at work, but I did manage to fix the fit of the sheath during lunchtime, and yeah, the shape was all wrong because I failed to cut symmetrically, but it's not noticeable anyway, so it is what it is. Also, I personally think that the weird horn shape thing added some charm to the entire build, but maybe that's just Stockholm Syndrome. Maybe it's just scopium. Who knows? I was running out of time, so who cares? I got started on detailing the sheath that night, but I fell asleep because I was so exhausted. Who wouldn't be exhausted when you have to commute like this every single day? But it turned out that was fine. There was another typhoon that decided to say hello that night, and Metro Manila was placed under signal number 2, which meant that I was once again allowed to work from home. I actually had an entire conversation with my mom about whether I should go to the office that day or not, but my desire to paint the sword won out, and I told HR that I was simply not going to risk wading through floodwaters for minimum wage, really. Ideally, I would have primed my EVA foam with Elastidip prior to painting it properly, Elastidip being the local equivalent of Plastidip, but I didn't have time to buy a new can of it because all of the spray paint stores are already closed whenever I go home from work because commuting in Metro Manila sucks ass. To compensate, I aggressively heated up the Scimitar with a heat gun and absolutely doused it in black spray paint. I sprayed on as many coats as I could before running out of paint to ensure that the foam got saturated with the paint and that the surface would dry as smoothly as possible given the circumstances. And because I was so short on time, I had to multitask, and while I let the black paint cure, I finished detailing the sheath. I didn't expect it to take as long as it did, so much so that instead of gluing it the normal way, which was with contact cement, because I was gluing something with a large surface area, I ended up gluing the large parts with super glue instead, which you shouldn't do because it would create bad air pockets. But it wasn't too noticeable, so it was fine. Once I deemed the sword to be sufficiently dry, I did a couple of test fits with the sheath and everything seemed to be in order. Regardless, I still sanded the insides of the sheath by gluing a piece of sandpaper onto a paper towel tube and doing whatever the hell this is. Everywhere I go, I see his face. This was a precautionary measure because I predicted that the paint would make my sword thicker by a few millimeters, and that might affect the overall fit. And in between detailing the sheath and actually doing the job I'm getting paid for, I blacked out. And before I knew it, the sheath was ready for painting. Now, what do this sword and Shillian's parents have in common? That's right, they both hung themselves. Anyway, I primed the sheath with more black spray paint, and while I waited for that to dry, I cleaned my workspace. And finally, I could spray paint the sword with the right color this time. I covered the handle with tape and a plastic bag since they're supposed to stay jet black anyway, and I painted the blade with silver silver chrome spray paint. Why silver chrome spray paint, you might ask? Normally, metallic spray paint look glittery and grainy rather than smooth and metallic when dry. So yeah, use chrome paint when painting metal, trust me. As much as I wanted to coat it in several layers, I was so worried about running out of paint before getting to the sheath, so I held back a bit. And, well, unfortunately, shiny paints are unforgiving when it comes to revealing every single flaw in your project, but I made peace with it. After allowing the chrome paint to dry, I proceeded to paint the eye. And, yeah, alright, I'm a human being and I needed food, so I got Jollibee. To seal everything and make the eyes slightly shiny, I applied a very thin layer of gloss varnish. I also tried weathering the hilt a bit, but it honestly just made the thing uglier, so I quickly gave up on that. And I didn't record it, but I actually painted over everything. I then got to masking parts of the sheath. And I personally hate masking stuff because it takes such a long time and it's so tedious and boring. But I suppose the time you save by getting to paint everything in one go is enough to compensate. So yeah, I do it every time anyway. I grit my teeth, put on Taskmaster so I could dissociate while I worked, and I just did it. And at last, at 12:45 a.m. on day 10, the day of the shoot, I finished painting Watchang Scimitar. I fell asleep on the sofa and woke up around 6 a.m., peeled off the tape, and did one last test fit before taking these pictures. That, my friends, is the expression of smug victory, even if it's not obvious. I'm just tired and anemic. I went to sleep in my actual bed after that, woke up at 9, got ready for my shoot, and 3 hours later, I'm ready to face the world. But only with the left side of my face because the right side was absolutely covered. I took these selfies, got on the car overstimulated, dehydrated, and underfed, and rated my driver 5 stars because he had this fan in his backseat. I arrived at the studio 10 minutes before the shoot, did a bunch of stupid dance moves, made a bit of mischief, and had pictures of myself and my newest art project taken! Thank you, Aesop. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have birthed this child. After the shoot, we went to this hot pot place and... is it raining outside? And I finally had my first proper meal of that day. Despite my mishap with the shape of the sheath, I think I successfully got the fit right. In the sense that even when I shake the entire thing, nothing comes off. But if I manually yank the scimitar out, the two pieces separate right off. And that concludes my 10-day long manic episode. So, was it worth it? Yes, I think so. I saved a bit of money because I already have the tools I needed at home. And really, once you get hold of the sword, you can't help but want to pose with it. And maybe you're so happy that you end up dissolving into a bunch of butterflies. Who knows? I don't know when I'll be back, but until then, I'll see you guys next time. Subscribe for very infrequent uploads. Or not. I'm not forcing you. Thank you for watching. Bye!